Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us in our conversation. My name's Kate Charters, and I'm the chair of SEGRA, which stands for Sustainable Economic Growth for Regional Australia. SEGRA is delighted to welcome you to our 15th conversation about COVID-19 in Australia. I'd like to particularly welcome our three speakers for today. I'd like to warmly welcome Mayor Paul Antonio from Toowoomba Regional Council, who's also the chair of its Economic Development Committee. Todd Rohl, the CEO of Toowoomba Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Peter Homan, the CEO of Southern Queensland Country Tourism. Thank you all very much for time for today's conversation. For those of you who don't know, Toowoomba is located 125 kilometres west of Brisbane and has a population of 134,000. Sits within the Southeast Queensland region, which has a population of 3.6 million. Toowoomba is the second most populous inland city in the country after the national capital of Canberra, and hence the largest town on the Darling Downs. So thank you very much for giving us a little bit window into the activities that are going on in Toowoomba. It won't be possible to have registrations talk during the panel discussion, but there is a chat box at the bottom right hand corner, and I strongly encourage you to use this to have input both in terms of questions but also information about your own circumstances. There is a recording of the event which will be available on the Google website on Monday. And you'll also notice at the top of the chat, there's a link to the resources we've put together and to the diagram that we'll be presenting shortly. As the COVID-19 pandemic plays out across the world and Australia acts to address this evolving situation, SEGRA wanted to provide a forum where people who live, work and invest in regional Australia could advance their ideas about responding to COVID-19. The idea of this series of conversations is assisting to bringing together key issues and opportunities while hearing firsthand from people tackling the impacts of COVID-19 in the regions. Most importantly, it's about practical actions across business, tourism and economic development, setting up for the future. At the end of each of the webinars, I put together a communique which covers the key issues and action agendas that have been raised in the conversation. Next Monday we will be putting out a summary communique which we'll be forwarding to all the elected officials in Australia that are outlining the regional perspective on COVID-19. So keep your eye out for that as well. The idea of the series is bringing people together but also bringing ideas together. Robert has been compiling a list of the issues as they've come up and some action agendas associated with them. So can I hand over to you, Robert?
Yes, thanks, Kate. I'll just quickly go to the diagram we've been developing. And we're here. Right, it's interesting, you know, we've done 14 sessions over the last 6 or so weeks, and I think post-pandemic regional Australia, which is what we've just been discussing, we're actually starting to see the emergence of what that might look like. And of course, it's going to be clearer as we go on. But as we've had the discussions, it's all been around how can we collect the best ideas to start looking at what the transition into the new economy will be for the region. So we're way more proactive about it for regional communities. So out of those discussions, we'll be building this diagram really from the left, moving to the right as we've completed the 14 now discussions across a whole lot of topics, from community government, entrepreneurs, leadership, Main Street, circular economy. It's a whole lot of things that have been discussed there. But what I'd like to do, as I usually do at each session, is just talk about the inputs of from our last panel session, which was investment attraction. And what's really come out of those was quite interesting. It was a great session, a lot of content in it, and I've just picked a few highlights. One of the things that's emerging from a lot of conversations is the idea of developing collaborative platforms to help plug gaps where some of our platforms aren't connecting whether it's business community or producers and users. So that's really interesting. There's a common thread about plugging gaps with the use of platforms. But also from the investment side, they made it clear there's lots of money for good investments. There isn't a shortage of money. It's about how you create a good investment and pitch that. There's issues raised about creating the investable project pipelines, that there needs to be more investable projects in regional Australia to be able to tap into the money that's interested in it. Very much raising the investment profile of regional Australia is a huge opportunity now. And one of the sort of tips from one of our speakers last session was the first investor is a critical one. It's the tipping point. So when just getting those partnerships early and getting that breakthrough. But that's as we've sort of collated over the last 6 weeks. And Kate, I'll just hand it back to you.
Good, thanks. Thanks, Robert. It's lovely to have Mayor Paul Antonio on the session, because Toowoomba has been particularly proactive in attracting investment into their region. And so we look forward to hearing from Paul shortly on some of those issues. But if firstly I could turn to you, Todd, if you could tell us a little bit about the impact of COVID-19 on businesses and how the Chamber of Commerce has gone about responding to this. Thanks, Todd.
Well, thank you, and thank you for allowing me to be part of this today, and thank you, and good morning to all speakers. Hi, Paul, how are you going up there, up the road? I guess, to put it simply, the impact was swift and direct. And we saw, in a very short period of time, huge impact, of course, in the primarily entertainment and hospitality fields. And that was swift. And we're even still seeing today the impacts of that. The Chamber has played a critical role here in, one, as a conduit of information. Let's not forget those early days when every single day there seemed to be a changed circumstance, a changed policy position, a changed view in the world in terms of what would happen or how we would react and respond to that. I think what we saw over time from the small business point of view is slowly some greater certainty and direction by government as we all got. This was a major disruption. This was something which none of us have ever experienced before. So what we saw is real growth, I thought, in the leadership in government during that time. And that's really what the small business community particularly wanted. They were really short in that leadership about where to go and what to do. And our chamber played a significant role. Now we know, there will be some estimates, people are saying around 7,000 job losses through the region in the next quarter as a direct result. And we're still seeing that today. But the chamber, as I said, its core role was supporting, advocating for small business. And we saw that, and we did that at a national, local and a state level. And bits and pieces, every little bit helped in terms of keeping people in jobs and protecting jobs. So we really saw that initial stage, and we're trying to squeeze out of it is that relief stage. And it's had a major impact on small businesses in the sense of they've had to readapt, reinvent. And I think as we move through the discussion later today, I think what we'll see as we get to the revive stage, which I think we're in, and then rebuild, is what our communities look like, our small business communities will change rapidly in the next 12 to 18 months.
Todd, I've just got a question on that. We've had a lot of commentators and different stakeholders say that COVID, if anything, has just amplified the underlying weaknesses that were there in the first place. It's accelerated a whole lot of things. And I know from Toowoomba CBD point of view, there's been particular challenges there for the evolution of business. Have you found that COVID really has just brought that to the surface now? Is it more urgent to address some of the things that probably were already there? I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
Robert, I think this unwanted call to adventure, as I call it, has certainly demonstrated there's gaps. And there's major gaps. And it's certainly demonstrated that, let's say, the embracing technology. We all knew it was there. We all could have been doing these things for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. But it was this major disruption or this unwanted call which actually forced us. It was a forced disruption to make us look at different ways to do business. Now, if you look at the Toowoomba CBD, which Robert, you know, is a passion of mine, and as Paul knows is a passion of mine as well, we think that this disruption will lead to significant changes potentially in how we plan the CBD, how we adapt to the CBD, how we interact with the CBD. It could change significantly. So I think what it did is force us to use things that we knew were already there but weren't potentially not going to do. But it also identified those weaknesses in our system, those weaknesses in technology capacity, those weaknesses in we didn't all have our online programs up and running, those weaknesses in the diversity of our businesses. If you take a good example, we got some great examples in this main street of Toowoomba where businesses, say the hospitality or the cafe, had a side business which was delivering pre-cooked meals, and you see a 200% increase in the pre-cooked meal delivery and obviously the opposite decrease in the hospitality. So what we're seeing is, as I was thinking, the gaps allow people to reinvent themselves. The gaps allow people to see what was missing, and it allowed them to actually strategically, if they had time, and I think they're getting time now, to look at what they need to do now for any major disruptions in the future.
Thanks, Todd. And certainly continuity planning is one of the things that should be exercising businesses' minds in this downtime, as well as you say, sprucing up their online images. Now, if I could just turn to you, Peter, we all understand the devastation of COVID-19 on the tourism and hospitality industry, but could you tell us a little bit about what Southern Queensland Country Tourism has been doing to mitigate these effects and to launch themselves into the future? Thanks.
Yeah, it's been a terrible impact on the tourism industry. It's been like a train hitting a brick wall, I think. Most of our industry is down about 90%, but we've actually been active in market. Now's been the perfect time for us. Tourism is very strong in social and digital media, and we've been incredibly active in market, building our audiences, building awareness, I guess, for the region. And for any of you out there who are wondering what you're doing with your social media, it should be all about the dreaming phase at the moment, but that is changing drastically. You know, we should really now be looking at the recovery phase. So we've been in market. We've been using artificial intelligence marketing to build our audiences. It just works really well. It's a really engaged way of grabbing the right people. And I was on a talk last night about artificial intelligence, and it is just the way of the future, just the way it can work with data, whether it's in health or in ag or any industry at all, but particularly in tourism, where data has always been really poor. You know, data in tourism has been, for years, traditionally has just been a very poor thing, and we haven't really worried about it, but it actually is really important for us to build our audiences. And one of the big problems that we face is when we do go back into market with our recovery campaign, is we'll be competing across a whole lot of other people who are doing the same. Fortunately for us in this region here, we are in a short drive distance of major population centres, from the top of the Sunshine Coast right down to the bottom of the Gold Coast. We're only a 2 to 3 hour drive maximum from all those places. And it'll be the drive campaigns that come back on, it'll be the drive routes that come back on first when non-essential travel is allowed. And it should be within 200 to 400 kilometre distances. So we think we're in a perfect place to, capitalise on that. So what we've been doing is building those audiences in the first place. In the second phase, and we've had to shorten the phases up, as things have changed, as we keep getting different information. And Todd alluded to that before on the way in, but now we're getting different information on the way out as well. Probably not as much and not changing as drastically. But, there's things happening. And of course, the National Cabinet's on this afternoon, and we expect some things will be, the restrictions will be relaxed. And then, of course, we have to wait for our state to then implement their own interpretation on that. But So phase 2 for us has been will be about getting people to dive deeper. And there's a great old thing, and I don't want to. It's not a social media lesson or anything, but you can't sell every time you go to market. You just cannot sell. You actually need to lead people down a path, and then do the sales pitch right at the end. So. And Todd and I have had quite a few discussions over the last couple of weeks. So how we can do this together and in collaboration, and also the Toowoomba Regional Council. So in each area we'll work individually. We've got quite a diverse area. We've got very much a different drive market sitting on the eastern part of our area compared to the western, with different offerings. So the beauty about using artificial intelligence is that you can absolutely target the right people for each area. And so the second phase will all be about the content, diving a bit deeper, and then the third phase will be the sell, and that'll be about the conversion piece. And we think we've got a really good, strong recovery plan, and working again with all the councils in our area. And while we're concentrating on Toowoomba Regional Council, working with Toowoomba and with Todd. So we've got some really smart things coming up. We're just working through the early stages of those, but we expect that tourism will bounce really quickly in this area. In fact, we have an opportunity to have tourism like we've never had before. The total tourism market, and again, I know this is a national call, but the total market in Queensland outbound is $50 billion a year in tourism. That's people leaving to go on international holidays. The total domestic market and inbound international market is only worth 30 billion. So there's a really big gap there. And we've been looking at some research that came out of the University of Queensland that's showing 58% of all people are willing to travel almost immediately. The non-essential travel is let back on. And sentiment right across the globe, including in Europe, where they're just slowly starting to relax some of their restrictions, is strong forward, and really strong forward bookings in wholesalers. Big problem though is a lot of wholesalers have actually already gone to the wall, and that's been a really big problem with tourism. There's a distribution chain in tourism, and some of them have gone under, and they've brought a lot of smaller operators down because the smaller operators rely on those distribution channels to provide business to them, and they're owed a lot of money, and sadly they've brought a lot of people down. So in tourism, it's going to be a completely different world when we re-engineer and we come back on. But in the first instance, the bookings, when the restrictions are relaxed or the handbrake comes let off, we think that we're going to it's going to bounce really quickly. And fortunately for jobs in the area, and Todd alluded to it before, how people have changed their businesses. One of the great things about tourism is that you can dial it up pretty quickly, and it provides a lot of jobs. It's very resource hungry. You need your baristas, you need your front of house staff, you need people on the desk, you need receptionists. It's not an automated industry, so it provides a lot of jobs. I know in some instances they're not very high paid jobs, but it's a great way of bringing people into region, and tourism's going to lead a lot of that recovery, both here and internationally. There was a paper came out from Tourism Events Queensland from Japan a couple of weeks ago. Their federal government is actually investing trillions of yen into the economy, and how they're doing it is, if you can travel outside your prefecture and stay a night or two, they're actually giving you a rebate. So, people recognise the value of tourism as a very quick way to get people moving around and economies, local community economies restarted. So we think we're in a great position here.
Peter, just a question there. To bounce off your referring to the different world we'll have to adapt to in tourism. I'm just wondering, in the past, tourism and regions have relied a lot on events and festivals. And I know, Toowoomba's got the classic Carnival of Flowers. Do you think, in a post-COVID market and the different world, is it time to rethink that, to innovate? Is there a time now we should really think a bit differently about what those traditional products have been?
Absolutely. And there's a great example, and Todd alluded to it before about, how we've had the technology, we haven't done much with it. And I take the example of the Boston Marathon. Here's a great example, and they've been doing this for years. So what they do, you can join the Boston Marathon online. You pay, I think it's $200 US. You get sent your singlet with your number on it. They map a route out from your house of the exact distance that the Boston Marathon is. And a week or two before you actually run the event, you log it. And then when the event's on and you're watching it in your TV, you could be in Shanghai or Berlin or anywhere else, your name's actually coming up on the list because, you know, you're actually competing with everyone else in the Boston Marathon. So it does two things. You know, it creates a massive interest in the Boston Marathon. And secondly, it creates a second income stream for them. Plus, everyone's all wearing their Boston Marathon T-shirts, not only the day that they do their course around their house, but forevermore on a day. So it's a great way of advertising. But those things have been around for a little while. I expect them to become more and more. And as we all know, there's been, you know, what we're doing today on Zoom or on Microsoft Teams or whatever is a great way of the future. Sadly, though, some events will just need to be reliant on people coming, and but you can just have to adjust, I think. And events are a great provider of tourism. You know, they give people a time frame to travel in, and they give you a reason to travel. And they're a great generator of tourism. And we don't want to see them all not be held because of mass gathering laws. But you know, I'm sure there's some adaptation. I did see a restaurant yesterday in Sweden too. They built these little plastic shelters out the front which hold two people, and they're all separated, but it's working. They're all full, and obviously it works for social distancing.
Robert,
Sorry, Kate, you're muted, Don.
Sorry, I'm just keen to bring the Mayor in, who's been patiently waiting. Thank you very much, Paul. And today you're wearing your hat not just as the Mayor of Toowoomba, but as the Chair of the Local Economic Development Committee. I'm aware that councils have been developing recovery strategies, and you'd be familiar with the Western Downs Recovery Plan released last week. Can you talk us through what some of the issues your committee have been focusing on and some key priorities for Toowoomba?
Well, the council has very clearly started on stage one of what we believe will be a recovery package that could end up at probably getting up towards $100 million when we add to it the infrastructure that we intend to build and we can bring forward. We started off with some concessions for people, and every rate notice except there's one particular category of the corporate, the big business in town won't be getting it, but small business, people who have houses, people who have farms will all get $125 each of their rate notice. It'll go through by way of a credit. In fact, it has gone through. That's the very first package that we've done. That's $10.5 million that comes out of our money. But included in that, there's a free parking in the CBD, economic benefit for community groups. We are also looking at more rapid payment of accounts. We've been on 30 days. We've brought that forward to 14 days so that the businesses in town will get a quicker shot in the arm. And when it comes to procurement, you know, we have some guidelines and when it comes to procurement, and we are making sure that local businesses for projects have an opportunity to keep it local under $200,000 bids. So that's something we've done. I just want to comment a little bit on the tourism bit, and I have great respect for both Todd and for Peter in the work that they're doing for this community. I think tourism has tremendous potential, and as we see, international tourism is obviously going to get a big hit, but that will then give us opportunity as a region to do something about tourism. And I think each and every community has something. Now, I went to the last election, which was only a month or so ago, wanting to put about $5 million per year into our smaller communities. Each community has something special. No matter what. If you look at a little place like Clifton, they've got a megafauna collection of note that has been recognised by the authorities. My hometown of Mulmerran, I don't like going into my hometown but too often because of talking about it and promoting it, because I get challenged by that. But in saying that, we are Australia's camp oven capital. Why would we not develop that as a year-round event or a year-round opportunity? So I think tourism is one of the options we have coming out of this to invest in as a council, invest in those smaller communities which have a bit of a feeling that they're being a bit left behind. Can I say that we've done some work lately on the investment in the CBD in Toowoomba? We've got a strategy for the CBD, and over the last 10 years, which is the first half of a 20-year period that we're looking at, there's been some $800 million invested. Now, okay, some of that's QIC and Grand Central, but there has been a significant amount going into hotels. There's 2 hotels being built. One of those got a benefit from council to the tune of $1 million in terms of infrastructure fees. I'm a great believer in incentives when you want to get something to happen. We want something to happen in the CBD. We want things to grow. So I think that we're well and truly up with it. I really think that some of the things we have done, the rate concession, postponing the sale of land, extending animal registrations, rent relief, 100% rent relief for small businesses that occupy council-owned properties for a 3-month period, and then it will be reviewed. A refund of 50% in food licence fees for the 19-20 financial year, and a 50% to refund in personal appearance retail licence fees for the same period of time. So we're also looking at some of the not-for-profits around town, the sporting organisation, and there's a lot of them. And they, if they wish, can get grants of up to $499 just to make sure that they can do certain things that will help them get through this period. This has been a very difficult and a most unexpected period for this community and, in fact, the whole world. No one saw this one coming. But in saying that, we're learning something from it. We're currently going through an analysis of how we deliver our services. And we are learning a lot from this particular event. I believe very strongly that any crisis you have in your life, no matter whether it's personal or whether it's part of an organisation that you're part of, where there is a crisis, there are tremendous learnings from that for everybody. And I'm fairly sure that we will do well out of this. We're looking at making sure we can have more people working from home, more people working from our smaller communities, and we've taken a lot of people out of those smaller communities and centralised them, which is a normal thing that a big organisation of any nature does, whether it be local government, whether it be business, no matter what. So I think the other thing to think about when you think about Toowoomba is the breadth of the economy here. I would imagine when it comes to our recovery, the key players in this economy here, of course, are retail, and it's not the biggest, but health is certainly the biggest and the broadest possible area, with aged care right through to fertility clinics, that sort of thing. Then, of course, education is massive. They're stable. They're not changing. Okay, there's a difference in how they're operating currently, but they're not going to change. In fact, they're going to grow. You know, we have an organisation that's building health in Toowoomba. We have an organisation that's building education in Toowoomba and looking for opportunities. So we believe that there are, you know, opportunities for Toowoomba to come back. When we talk about coming out of this, the things that we will be wanting to see, we'll want to see partnerships with the state and federal government where we can have an input and they too can have inputs to make sure that we get some of the infrastructure that we so want in this area. We've got to be very conscious of the fact that water security for our region, not just Toowoomba, but the broader region, is critical. And of course, we're doing a fair bit of work on that. We've got a group of people who are actually working now on that. And some of those people are, in fact, in northern New South Wales, who are helping us as we study. The Lockyer Valley are part of it. Southern Downs, Western Downs, and ourselves. And water security will be something for the future. We're actually reviewing our town planning documents at the moment. And, you know, we obviously, like any other local authority, are a little bit challenged around planning. Each and every one of us who is in public life knows that planning is a big issue. And we're certainly going to change our planning scheme to make it more user-friendly, make it investment-friendly, and try and cut the timeframes if we possibly can. But there are roads of regional significance that we're working on at the moment. And some of those roads are not just in our shire, they're in the Western Downs Shire as well. And we want to make sure that there's a particular road where there are 11 feedlots and tremendous amount of employment. So that's the kind of road we need to make sure is upgraded. But we're going to invest in community infrastructure in our libraries. We've got a new library coming in the Highfields area, working on art galleries, halls. We're putting a lot of money into swimming pools at the moment, just to make our region more livable. I really think that there are learnings from this, and I'm looking forward when we can look back and analyse the changes that we've made quite naturally to keep this place going. And I'm pretty sure that, you know, when it comes to our service delivery review, the biggest learnings that we will ever be likely to have will come out of what we're going through right now. Because we had plans to build a multi-storey, naturally, an office block to replace the ones we have now to build a brand new one. And do we need it that big? We have 500 people currently out of our 1,800 who are working from home. Why would we, you know, would that still be a good option into the future? So, yeah, look, I might leave it at that, and I'm happy to take some questions.
Paul, I'd like to follow up on one question there. I know at the moment with council, you're across all the issues and looking at all the sort of local government levers you can pull. And there's a point where, you know, I'm sure you'll be, identifying all the options. But my sort of question, a bit from left field, is in the sense that you're across the issues and in a post-COVID challenge, what do you think are the critical things that, you know, local government hasn't got a lever to pull that actually needs to happen, but it can't come from local government? What are your thoughts there that it's critical?
Well, look, I think one of the biggest issues that we have in local government, and this is right across Australia, every time I go to a conference in Canberra, everybody is singing off the one hymn sheet. And that's about how much money local government actually gets from the federal and the state government. You know, we are the community builders. We are the people who have an understanding of what needs to be done. We know where the parks, the roads, the water, the sewage, all those things ought to go. And we have 30% of the infrastructure of this nation to look after on 3%. 3% of the tax take. We've got 76% of the roads to look after on that same tax take. So look, one of the key things that we need to do, and I think in recent years in my career, there was a time when if we built certain infrastructure, we knew that we'd get a 40% subsidy. That is now of a competitive nature. We are not guaranteed that money. We need certainty of external funding coming our way.
Can I just touch on a couple of points that I think Paul made a very good point, firstly, and then I want to talk about something that Peter and Paul said, and that is the workforce. I think you could have a whole session on what the workforce may or may look like and do some scenario testing in the next 10 to 15 years, because Paul, I think, is 100% correct. If he's got 500 people there, how big does that office really need to be anymore? And Paul's 100% correct. What this experience, if you like, has demonstrated us, to me anyway, and probably to small business and to small businesses who are our members, is that there is a greater trust now of people working from home, a greater understanding of how it can be done. And there's a real sense of reconnecting with community as a result of it. You know, I'm reconnecting with my neighbours, or that I haven't spoke to for ages, or I get to walk with the family at 4 o'clock instead of 6 o'clock because I'm thinking I should be at home working. So I think there's a whole piece on that which would be really fascinating to look what impact it has on the structure of our cities, how we move around, and small businesses generally. But the other point, which I think Peter and Paul made, is this recovery. You know, I think we're past relief, and I would call from a small business perspective, I think the next stage in inverted commas recovery is revive and then rebuild. So what that looks like, it takes time and the planning for that. And I think that will be an 18-month to 2-year experience. And as Peter pointed out, I think the only way this will happen in this experience is through collaboration. Like, we don't have to agree. It's not about agreeing. It's about putting some views forward and being respectful, and then collectively working for the region that we all support, whether it's big business, small business, tourism, government, or the like. And I think what I'm getting out of this experience, and what a number of our small businesses are getting out of this experience, is how fundamental connection, attachment, and collaboration is as we move forward.
I agree with you, Todd. I think that there's never been a greater time when we need to collaborate with our partners in state and federal government to look at what is the very best for our community. We know that much of the recovery in our particular area can be driven out of investment by the state and federal government and ourselves in projects that will create jobs, by encouraging businesses to get back into it. You know, many of these businesses have, the coffee shop that I get my breakfast and coffee from, they are so struggling. You can just feel it when you walk in there. And I don't have an answer for them at this point in time, except let's get on with it and get moving again. And then, of course, we must be cautious of that, because we know that we're moving into winter when it comes to the coronavirus. And we know that wintertime, particularly in this part of the world, when it comes to August and the exhibition in the Royal Brisbane Show, that's when flu really gets going. And I guess that corona's no different.
Yeah, I was wondering, sort of a question to probably Peter and Todd about, even though we're moving into a post-COVID environment and it's about attracting additional business and visitation, what about filling the gaps? The underlying thing here is a lot of businesses have gone bankrupt. There's now gaps that have happened at a scale we've never had before. And I'm wondering, is there needing to be another thread to the bow of rebuild, recovering, when we've got this unusual acceleration of businesses going to the wall all of a sudden?
I can answer that from a tourism perspective, and Todd can answer it more from a small business in town. But for tourism, the biggest problem that it currently exists, and it's right across Queensland as a whole, is that the product is not mature enough. And there are some sectors that are, and there's some sectors that aren't. And underlying that, Robert, and to answer your question, is that's where we can help in many ways. So if you walk into any travel agent in Australia or in the world, for example, and said, I want to come to Toowoomba, what am I going to book? And I know there's an airport there and I can catch a plane there at any given time. Our biggest problem is that we don't have enough product sitting in there that travel agent can book. And that's where we need to do a lot more work. And that's where we will be working. So yeah, that's a definite missing gap in tourism product, that's for sure. On this, not only just in Toowoomba, but the whole area here, and in many instances right across the state. And the state government here do recognise that. And we've been working with Paul and his council, and also now Todd, but about building that up as well. So we'll do as much as we can in that area.
You know, I made the point before that every community has something special to offer. And I mentioned Clifton, I mentioned my hometown of Mulmerran, but every community right across this whole area of Southern Queensland, Southwest Queensland has a lot. Don't forget that from Toowoomba's perspective, we're within an hour and a half of over 3 million people at the moment who live in Southeast Queensland. By 2041, that will be 5.5 million people. Mm. And I think there's a degree of urgency for us here in Toowoomba itself, working with the Lockyer Valley Regional Council, to make sure we develop the tourism potential of our escarpment. Mm. Don't own the only mountain in Southeast Queensland. So, you know, the message is get on with it, do it. And of course, we're working on Quarry Gardens, we're working on mountain biking, we're working still, as I'm Deputy Chair of the Council of Mayors in Southeast Queensland. And we are still, just whilst we're putting it back a little, we are still very keen to bid for the 2032 Olympics. And I think that will be a major driver.
Incredible. And I think all those bike trails, Paul, and walking trails that the council's built over the last few years have just been an incredible asset, especially for tourism. And they just attract people. They're high value travellers. They spend a lot of money in the region. They just come very quietly up the hill and enjoy all those assets. And I think that's that work you've been doing in that area has just been fantastic.
Yeah, and I'm so delighted we've got the cooperation of the Lockyer Valley Regional Council as well. And I think, once again, that's the way we get things to happen. And I felt a bit out of it when I first went to ComSec in southeast Queensland with Lord Mayor Graham Quirk and his team. But there's a tremendous advantage. And I've seen some of the best leadership that I've ever seen when Lord Mayor Quirk got a group of mayors, all of whom had a different focus, talk about people mass movement. A study on people mass movement. Nobody argued with it. Everyone said it ought to be done. From that was generated the Olympic bid. From that was generated the option of a fast train for Toowoomba, and in fact, a 45-minute region that included everybody. We are working hard with Ipswich and the Lockyer Valley to keep that fast train on the agenda because it's the most likely one to fall off. So
what that'll do for tourism, a fast train to Brisbane, between Brisbane and Toowoomba, would be incredible for tourism.
Yes.
Incredible.
So, and these are dreams, as is our dream around water security, of having a grid that included northern New South Wales, where there's a fair bit of water. Now, we know the politics will be difficult, but we also know if we do win it, it'll be a tremendous economic boost, a tremendous job boost for this whole area.
I'd like to, Todd, I'd like to throw a question to Todd there about the emergence of a lot of discussion about localism, short supply chains, but local food, community support. And I really wonder about, and then it comes to the gaps too, the CBD. What do you see its role in the future in that product? Because it seems like culture, food, tourism are going to be important products as well, but that hospitality part of the market's been hit really hard, and some of those guys aren't coming back. What's the situation from your point of view in Toowoomba CBD in that context?
I'll answer that in, I guess, a couple key points, Robert, is this, the Chamber did a Say Yes to Local campaign, but it's really been supported. This community has really supported its local hospitality industry in this time of need. The hospitality community, cafes and restaurants, have been expressing their absolute joy and gratitude to the support that's been provided by this community through takeaways. And I think what you've seen is that throughout, not just Toowoomba, but of course throughout Australia during this time. But the interesting thing is that the interesting thing will be, and the supply chain, Toowoomba is gifted, or in that sense is that we have a great food supply chain, you know, from growers right through to the hospitality industry. Now, what we will see, or what we know will happen, is some restaurants will have advised us that they will probably shut down and only do deliveries from now on, because that reduces all their costs, all that setup costs, all that commercial kitchens, all that restaurant space. So that will happen. The other thing which will be fascinating to see what happen with new restrictions, for example, of 1 person per 4 metres, or what it is proposed to open your restaurant. We'll be putting some proposals, we've spoke to some of our members about some proposals about restaurants even getting bigger, so they then have the capacity to be able to repay back their loans. So on one hand, you got some hospitality industry saying they're just going to do purely delivery and refocus, really come back to a typical home-based business type arrangement, where others saying, I need more space to ensure my capacity is up to deliver. Now, ultimately, I think what will happen is all these things, whether it be workforce planning, hospitality industry, retail, which is slowly bringing back, will all have a direct impact on how we plan and how places like the Toowoomba CBD develop and evolve in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And that will be the fascinating component for me about how it sort of establishes itself, recreates an experience, recreates itself as the centre of town, which touches on all the things that Paul said about, you know, how workforces are reinventing themselves. It touches on what small businesses are saying. Will there be less foot traffic? And it touches on the important things from a tourism point of view. Like, we'll love all those tourism. You know, it just makes me smile when there's all these great tourism things. The supply chain for small business is critical. And then obviously what happens for the CBD. So it will be, I think there's probably many people more learned than me who can sit down and collaborate about what that may or may look like. But the most important thing is if you get it straight from the horse's mouth, you're hearing what small businesses are actually saying or how they're adapting, and they're all adapting very differently.
Thanks, Todd. Look, as always, we've run out of time, but I do want to give each of you the opportunity to say what the three most important things you think should be delivered in the short term. And I'll start with you, Paul. So three of the most important things you think need to happen.
Look, I think cooperation between all levels of government is critical to me.
Yep.
I think we must make absolutely sure that we work with our federal members, and we have at least two here, and we cooperate with the ones in the Lockyer Valley as well, to make sure that we do something that's going to benefit the whole area. The group of mayors that I chair in Western Queensland are covered totally by Minister Littleproud, and I think we must work together on things that will make a difference. I think that we will be looking at the world being quite different post-COVID. I think we're going to learn a lot from COVID-19, and I think we'll certainly do a whole lot more. And I think each and every small community, and I went to the election wanting to spend $5 million a year, putting it into small communities to work with investors in those communities to build tourism. They have no other way to go. Tourism is the big opportunity. It's the thing that could be there forever, 24 hours a day, not 24, but 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. It could bring opportunity to small communities, but they must be educated to be able to cope with it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And collaboration is a big thing for you, Paul, and that's really come out in your presentation today. Peter, can I throw to you for some immediate priorities?
Yeah, look, for us, that and I mentioned it before, is product development, helping our industry get to where they need to be. And it doesn't take that much, you know, just they need to be bookable. They need to be able to be found on the internet. You know, that's one of the big things, or to be booked by a travel agent. Experience development. And experience development's one of those sort of innocuous things, but it really works. It's about building the experience. So when they come into, say, Toowoomba, that they get an unbelievable experience. They get picked up at the airport. They get a champagne on the way back to their accommodation. They get the most amazing meal. They get a picnic in the park. They get taken down to the walking trails. Whatever it is, put some of that experience development. And thirdly, it has to be around tourism infrastructure and through all levels of government, as Paul talked about before. And the state has got a growing tourism infrastructure fund, and maybe they can bring 2 or 3 years forward and help some of the infrastructure projects get up. And I think that would help us immensely in the long term.
Right. And Todd?
I think I would say the key focus for me is around 3 key things. 1, how we reactivate Toowoomba and the region. 2, how we revive our small businesses through upskilling, training, those types of things. And thirdly, how we rebuild. And by rebuild, I'm thinking long term, you know, and the things that have been said. What is the tourism infrastructure that will create the supply chain of jobs? What is the broader state and federal infrastructure that will create a supply chain of jobs? How do we rebuild, accelerate our own infrastructure projects and the like? And I think if we think about reactivation, revival, then rebuilding, we should be on our way to pulling ourselves through a recovery.
Thanks very much, Todd. And look, again, thank you very much to Mayor Paul Antonio, Peter Homan and Todd Rohl. It's it's a great privilege to have people on the ground prepared to share their local hands-on knowledge. So thank you very much. We'll circulate a communique on Monday that will capture the key ideas of today's conversation. And we also have a latest news section in SEGRA, where the website under the general button pulls together some useful resources, and we'll put access to the Western Downs recovery plan there. Then finally, if you would like to contact me directly, my email's kate@segra.com.au. Roberts is robert@vitalplaces.com.au. On Tuesday next week, we'll be taking a leap in from the highly localised, which we've really enjoyed today, into the national scene, and we'll be hearing from RDA Tasmania and RDA Arana about their insights into the COVID-19 going forward from a federal perspective. Thank you all very much for your participation today. Thank you.